I can only assume that there was some loyalty for Smith that wasn't there for Warner at Cricket Australia. And to me, that's ridiculous.
It makes me laugh watching that bit of footage. I was actually sitting next to Shane Warne, and he was egging me on beautifully.
His best chance with captaincy is if he takes quite a bit of advice from Stokes.
Hello there, welcome to our preview of the first men's Ashes cricket test of the summer, coming to you from the Gabba. Rarely has an Ashes series been surrounded by such palpable excitement and controversy as well. My name's Matthew Thompson. I've swapped the Steeden Rugby League ball for the red kookaburra, and I've got an esteemed panel to have a look at the next week in Brisbane and the summer ahead more broadly. Ian Chappell, great to see you.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Matt.
Indeed. Tom Decent, Nine newspaper cricket writer for newspapers around the country. Plenty to talk about.
Yeah, there's been a lot going on, hasn't there, Matt?
Indeed, we'll talk about all of that and plenty more. And live via satellite, maybe with a fishing rod in hand, maybe from Brisbane, our own Mark Taylor, former Australian skipper. How are you, Mark?
G'day, Matt. G'day, gents. No, actually, I haven't got back home, but probably like Ian Chappell and Tom, I'm waiting to find out where I'm going next, whether we go to the Gabba or Melbourne or Adelaide. I'm not really sure. Yes,
well, we're starting an Ashes series not knowing where the fifth test is going to be played. So that has to be a first. I'll start with you, Mark. Playing in an Ashes series, surely the pinnacle of any test cricketer's career when you reflect on your time as a player and a captain in Australia versus England battles. Where does it rate for you?
Oh, look, for me, it was a realisation that, yes, I've made it. I'd played a couple of test matches at the start of my career against the West Indies and didn't make a lot of runs, made a 30 and a 20. But it wasn't until the 89 Ashes tour that I was picked on that I thought, wow, I've actually made the upper echelon of Australian cricket. And then to make some runs and for us to win in England in 1989 as we did was, well, yeah, it wasn't so much the realisation of a dream. It was a realisation that, yes, I can play at the best level against some of the best opposition in the world and do well. And I thought, well, now I can make a bit of a career out of this. So to me, it was just like it was ticking a box that I was good enough.
Yes, and when you think back on the rivalry through your time as a player, and I know you're not one for great sentiment, I wonder now, though, in the professional era where Australian and English players are often teammates in franchise cricket around the world, do you see the rivalry now as spirited as ever?
Yeah, rivalry was always there, and we used to see the England players in their dressing room or our dressing room pretty well every night. You wouldn't see all of them, but you'd see a lot of them. So there was plenty of rivalry there. Playing against England was probably regarded as the toughest series in our time. But I must admit that it didn't make much difference to me whether we were playing England or who we were playing. It was just a test match that had to be won. So I didn't look upon the Ashes as something special, just a tough test match to be won.
And Tom, from a news perspective, surely the build-up to this series is the most headline-rich maybe we've ever seen. The series initially in doubt, an Australian captain changing within a fortnight of the first ball being bowled. A huge story in English cricket with the racism scandal hanging over the game there, plus the usual selection questions.
It's been a huge pre-season for the journos, right? Obviously, major stories galore. Whether the series would go ahead, as you say, Joe Root and his crew dealing with the racism scandal back at home. Then Australia's thrown a curveball as well with Tim Payne out of action for obvious reasons. A new captain, probably three main selection issues as well for us to mull over and decide before the first test. What's happening with the rest of the series, La Nina, it goes on. There's no shortage of stuff.
And look, the schedule itself, we start Wednesday at the Gabba, a 4-day gap then to a pink ball test in Adelaide, 6 days to a Boxing Day test, 6 days to Sydney, and then another 5-day break. So 5 test matches in 6 weeks. And Ian, a very demanding initiation for Australia's new captain, Pat Cummins, a decision which seems to have been universally endorsed.
Yeah, I think it's a good decision. Pat, I think, will be a very good captain. It may take him a bit of time to work his way in. Usually does with a captain. If you've got any brains at all, you're going to get better as a captain, and I expect Pat to do that. And he'll learn how to cope with the the exercise of being a bowler as well as a captain. He'll cope with that better as he goes along. I'm worried about the vice captaincy. I mean, the first problem I have is, why is there a different weight on the relationship of leadership between Warner and Smith? I mean, they both cheated in Cape Town. Let's not beat around the bush. It was cheating. And cheating, as a captain, if I'd have cheated, I would have thought, I won't be waiting for someone to ask me to resign. I'll get moved on, both from the captaincy and from the team. So now, I understand it's a bit different now, but I think that whatever Smith got, Warner should have got. And it didn't happen that way. So you've got to ask yourself the question, why did it happen that way? I can only assume that there was some loyalty for Smith that wasn't there for Warner at Cricket Australia. And to me, that's ridiculous.
You don't approve of the Smith appointment?
Well, I think they should have made a clean break. I think it should have been Pat Cummins, and all right, if it hadn't happened to be Marnus Labuschagne. The one thing you knew about Labuschagne was he was going to hold his place as a batsman. And that's the first requirement, that your captain holds his place in the team. So, no, I don't think the Smith appointment was a good one. But did I expect Cricket Australia to get it right? No.
Mark, your thoughts?
Well, look, I'm not going to go back on decisions that were made nearly 4 years ago now. They were made at the time in what was considered the best interest of cricket. And rightly or wrongly, I don't agree with Chaps. I think those decisions have now moved to where we are today. Smith has become the vice captain, A, obviously because the selectors wanted him as vice captain. B, I think even more importantly, is that Pat Cummins wants him as his vice captain, because he, I think, realises it is going to be a tougher job for him as a fast bowling captain, more so than someone like myself or Ian, who top order batsman, who when you're in the field is going to have a lot of time to think about field changes and bowling changes. So Pat needs someone to lean on, and I think he feels that Steve Smith is the right bloke for him. So I think from a team's point of view, it'll work very well. On Pat himself, I think he will be a very good leader. I know already he has enormous respect within the Australian cricket team change room, but also around the world. So I don't think there'll be any issue with who's running Australian cricket. It will be Pat Cummins. But as I've said many times in the lead up to this game, he'll need some people around him to support him when he's trying to take wickets on those tough, hard, sometimes dry pitch days that Australian cricket will produce over the next 6 weeks of this Ashes series.
Yeah. Look, the Test captaincy can wear people down sometimes, Mark. We've seen some lovely vision there of smiling Pat Cummins. I'm just wondering if at any stage he might get cranky to this point. We're channeling Alan Border a number of years ago.
Hey, I do. Talk to you, come here. Come here. That again, mate. Explain it. What was that? Test me, mate. We'll see.
Yes, we were going to cut Pat Cummins' head out and paste it over the top of Alan Border there, but it wouldn't have looked authentic, I don't think.
No, I don't think you'll see that with Pat. It will be interesting, though, as I mentioned a moment ago, when it does get tough, and there'll be tough days. There's always tough days for any captain, whether you're a batsman or a bowler. He'll have his tough days, and that's when he'll be really tested. 1 or 2 for 200. He's not getting wickets. Whatever, a catch goes down at a crucial moment in the game, that's when he's really going to need to take stock, take a breath and say, righto, it's just a game. But it's always easier said than done.
Yeah, I mean, that was ridiculous captaincy by Alan Border. You don't demand a player comes to you. You've got to know your players well, and you know how to handle them. But Pat Cummins will have tough days, as Mark points out. I would just like to know, though, how England are going to be 1 for 200. Who's going to get them?
Hold fire. We're going to look at all of that. Certainly there's some questions over there, top order. Before we move on from this captaincy discussion, Tom, some talk from Cricket Australia now that there'll be background checks on further appointees as Australian captain. I wonder how far back they'll go and what we need to check, don't we? Sort of already know we need to know.
Oh, absolutely. Look, I was fortunate enough to play with Pat in the juniors, played New South Wales 17s with him, and if there's any skeletons on him, then I'll give it up. He's just an absolute clean-skinned, great guy. I understand why Cricket Australia has done this in light of the Tim Payne story. I think that's just perception and a public sort of statement to at least look like they are, making sure that everyone who is, ascension to the top job is checked thoroughly. But look, I can't imagine that's going to be something that goes on in future, right? Like it all just seems a bit weird that they're doing that.
Sounds a bit bureaucratic, perhaps.
A bit bureaucratic. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, why have you got a panel of 5 to pick an Australian captain? That's the first question I'd ask. But if you don't know your Australian captain, then you've got to question the board members because, whilst we probably didn't agree with a lot of the board members from the past days, but at least they had a background in cricket. I'm not sure how much background in cricket there is with a lot of the board members currently. And for them to have a panel of 5 to appoint an Australian captain makes me wonder what is their background in cricket. Maybe not very good.
Let's talk about the first test itself. Weather forecast not great. Don't shoot the messenger. Rain expected or predicted at least every day of the 5 days. But Mark, the preparation of the respective teams, an intriguing element of this. Of the Australian side, Warner Smith and the bowlers have played no red ball cricket. On the flip side of that, and something that hasn't been discussed all that widely, is that the rest of the Australian squad have had 3 to 4 Shield games to get ready for a first test. England, their county season finished a number of weeks ago, and the rest of their squad essentially is off a T20 World Cup / IPL campaign. So probably the Australians are better prepared than the English.
Well, I think you can look at it from both points of view. England will say they've got better preparation because they've just had a recent series against India, which they lost 2-1, but at least it was tough, competitive test match cricket. As you say, about 7 or 8 of the Australian side that are going to play on Wednesday now have had at least 2 or 3 Shield games, so they've had a bit of a hit or a bowl. So the bottom line is, for me, is that neither side have had absolute ideal preparation, which is, I suppose, a sign of the times, a sign of these COVID times, and also this wet weather that we've seen in Australia. You've got quarantines, you've got wet weather, so you haven't had these sort of lead-in games that used to be the case many years ago, where a touring side would play a couple of Shield teams that had test players in it, and you had a really good workout. Now it's been nets, if you're lucky enough to get outdoors, but a lot of indoor nets as well. So neither side have had great preparation. But what that will mean on Wednesday is I don't think either side have got an advantage. The side will have the advantage with the one that comes out and plays well on day one. And I think the most intriguing thing for me will be that I'm not up there at the Gabba at the moment, but I'm hearing talk of green pitches, of humid conditions, wet conditions. Will one of the captains be brave enough to bowl? That will be the interesting thing. If it happens to be overcast and it's a bit green, we've seen what happens in the past. Here we go back to Nasser Hussain sort of 15 years ago, won the toss and bowled, and Australia made 400 on day one. So will someone be brave enough to say, we'll give our quicks the first go? That'll be the most intriguing thing for me about half an hour before the first ball is bowled.
Mitchell Starc, Ian, selected ahead of Jai Richardson. If you look at the trajectory of Stark's stats over the last 18 months, no doubt his form has been on the wane, and Richardson, the form bowler in Sheffield Shield cricket. Is that the right call?
I think it is. There's a couple of reasons. One, I think Mitchell Starc's a very good bowler if he gets it right. And two, being a left armour, it adds to the variety in the Australian attack. And I think that's important. So if you lose Mitchell Starc and you replace him with Jai Richardson's a good bowler, but he's also right arm. So now you've got a right arm quick attack with a right arm off spin bowler. And to me, that's a bit similar. At some point, Australia are going to have to probably play that attack. But I wouldn't be starting that way. I'd start with Starc.
Yeah, Tom, 23 wickets at 13 at a strike rate of 33 for Jai Richardson at the start of the Shield campaign. From what you're hearing inside the Australian camp, was that a tight call?
Oh, look, absolutely. But I mean, Justin Langer's a pretty loyal guy. He'd be very happy that Stark is the incumbent. Although his numbers haven't been super great, he probably has to go with him for at least the first test. Second test in Adelaide, we know under lights, he has a very good record there as well. Jai Richardson, 23 wickets, second most wickets in the Shield. Fair guy to have in your back pocket in case Stark doesn't perform in the first two tests.
Yeah.
I think therein lies part of the problem, though. The Shield cricket, as a selector, how much trust can you put in Sheffield Shield cricket? Because, it's probably a little bit different at the moment whether some test players are playing Shield cricket, but normally they don't play any. And so how do you then judge what a Sheffield Shield performance means in terms of what you're likely to do on the test field?
Yeah. Well, the England top order is the main focal point for the Australian new ball bowlers. And if you just have a look at the top three batsmen, Mark, that are likely to play in this first test for England. Rory Burns, test average 32. Did okay here in his first test in Australia, but Hamid has never toured Australia, averages 38 without a test century, and Zach Crawley at number 3 with a batting average of 28. That's certainly their vulnerable patch.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, and that's where Australia will think they're a real opportunity. David Milan also come into their thinking, who's been their incumbent number 3 in recent times, but his average also is 28, although he had a pretty good series in Australia 4 years ago. So there's no doubt England are going to need some protection for Joe Root. Joe Root's probably in the best form of his life at the moment, batting at number 4. He has 600s this calendar year for England, so he's in great form. But England do not need him coming in at 2 for 20 or 2 for 30 every test match. And so that top 3 you talked about, whoever they are going to need to try and blunt Hazelwood, Stark, Cummins. If they can do that, I think England are a chance because their batting order is long. I'm not exactly sure who they're going to pick, but they've obviously got Stokes, they've got Bairstow, they've got Ollie Pope to choose from, and they've got Chris Woke. So they've got a long batting lineup depending on who they pick, but they're going to need a good start. If they can get a good start, keep Joe Root in form, that's their best and probably only chance of winning the Ashes.
His batting average, though, in Australia, Joe Root, Ian, 38 compared to an average of 50 overall. I mean, this is... He's mentioned himself, actually, in the papers, and Tom will be aware of this, that it's a defining series for him as a captain. It's his defining series as a batsman.
Well, I wouldn't worry too much about his captaincy. I don't think that's very good. He's got an imagination problem that is important in Australia. His best chance with captaincy is if he takes quite a bit of advice from Stokes, and Stokes establishes himself as a very aggressive player. But the question I would ask Joe is, why don't you bat at 3? Because I've always believed that you are better off coming in at 1 for not very many than 2 for not very many. And no one has really proved that they can bat at 3. Joe has got all the credentials to bat at 3. There's never going to be a better time for him to bat at number 3 because he's in terrific form, but he just won't seem to bat at number 3. He might get lucky in Australia, and number 3, it could be Milan, and Milan I think's a reasonably decent player. If Milan has a good series at 3 and keeps Joe away from the bowling for a while, then it's got a chance of working. But I wouldn't be trusting to luck. I'd be saying, if I was Joe, I'm batting 3.
Ian's just put Joe right under the right under the blowtorch there. Tubby, you know better than most, though, about the exposure that an Ashes series has on a captain, particularly when they're in a vulnerable position. Give us an idea about the pressure Joe Root would be feeling when you think back to 97 in your own experience.
Oh, look, Joe comes into this series, at least, as I said a moment ago, in really good form. As I said, he's probably in the form of his life. For me, going back to 1997, I was playing terribly. I hadn't made runs for a good 6 months or so, and then we get the first test match at Edgbaston, and I think I made about 7 or 8, and the pressure was right on. I as you see from that bit of footage there, I might end up making 100, but we're still about 300 behind after the first inning. So it was nice for me to get the monkey off my back and make some runs, but we ended up losing that test match by 9 wickets, I think it was. So we had a lot of work to do. I think for Joe, he, as he mentioned in his press conference, an average of 38 in Australia, he's done okay. It's not bad in Australia by any means. But if he can have a really good series, make another couple of hundreds here, and give England a chance, if not go ahead and win the Ashes. It will be defining for Joe Root, no doubt about that, because he's been, I think, a very good batsman. I don't have him in the greats, along with, say, Kohli or Steve Smith of this era. But if he was to have a big Ashes series here, that might move him up a notch and obviously give England a huge chance of winning this Ashes series.
Yeah, #1 ranked batsman in the world at the moment, Joe Root. No bigger news story for the English, though, than Ben Stokes making an unexpected arrival on Australian shores, and he is one man that can stare down the Aussies.
Oh, we know what happened in the 2019 Ashes series, one of the unbelievable wins. Australia weren't planning for him to come out. Obviously, he had a few issues physically and mentally as well, but has managed to come out as well. Trevor Baylor spoke the other day, obviously a former England coach, about just the aura that he brings and confidence that he brings with coming out. Bat and ball, we know his numbers are fantastic here. He's got a good record in Australia. He'll bat at 5 there and bowl some handy overs as well to supplement what Anderson and Broad do.
So many classic Ashes moments across the years. There was only really one choice with Mark Taylor joining us here on the eve of a Gabba Ashes test. As a rugby league commentator, Mark Taylor, I couldn't have done it any better than this. The Peter Siddle hat-trick.
Letting the game flow. Got him at first slip. Peter Siddle. Oh, was there an edge? Oh, he's knocked him over. Crowd cheers. Here's Siddle. Oh, well, bowler's close. He's given him. He's given him. Peter Siddle's got a hat-trick on his birthday.
Oh, that was good stuff. You went next to him in the commentary box, were you? Did he jump off the chair or what happened?
He could well have jumped off the chair. I tell you what, who was the left-handed batsman at the end? Didn't they have reviews in?
Yeah.
I could not see how that was going to hit him.
Yeah, they had reviews in. Yeah, and he did review, I think. I think it was Stuart Broad, I think, was the last one. He did review and was given out.
Well, that just proves what I think of the DRS. I don't trust it.
I tell you what, though, it makes me laugh watching that bit of footage. I was actually sitting next to Shane Warne, and he was egging me on beautifully. He was sort of saying, "Come on, Tubby, tune those tonsils up," and he was really egging me on. And then when he with that big full one, and I must admit, when I watched it live, and I think I said something like, "Oh, that's close," because I'm a bit like Chaps. I thought it's leg side-ish, but it hit him really full. And then when I saw the finger go up, I just erupted. So, it makes me laugh watching the replay.
Yeah, well, you're a Dragons, maybe we might have to give you a call up for some sideline duties maybe in the future. Look, your chin music segment's not easy to say. I hope you deliver it better than me, Mark. Who are you going to put under the blowtorch here?
Look, I think from an Australian point of view, I'm going to put our sort of middle order under the blowtorch. If you look at recent times, you don't have to be Einstein to work out that we've got our runs from Warner, we've got our runs from Labuschagne, and we've got our runs from Smith, and they're our sort of bankers at the moment. But I really think it's time in Australian cricket that we stop. Well, we're not just going to stop looking to those three guys, but we've got to start looking to the next generation. So Travis Head's been given the tick as the number 5. The blowtorch is on him, obviously, a chance to nail his career down. To cement a spot in the Australian side, which he hasn't done. He averages a tick under 40 in Test cricket, which is not bad, but he's got his big runs against Sri Lanka and New Zealand. A bit like Joe Root, if he has a good series here, he cements the number 5 spot, maybe even higher up for years to come. So it's on him. Cameron Green at 6 has only played a handful of Test matches, but now he's been in and around the Australian setup for a while. Needs some runs from him, and obviously Marcus Harris at the top of the order. So mainly our lower middle order, for me, are the ones I'm watching. And obviously Marcus Harris, another opportunity to grab that opening spot. So they're the guys from an Australian point of view that I'm going to have my eye on for these first couple of Test matches.
Yeah, before I get Ian's thoughts on that, Tom, how close was that call? Khawaja, at this stage of his career, called into the squad. Your assumption was that he may well have nailed a place in the 11. He's averaging 65 with 2 centuries in the Shield so far. Travis Head averaging 50 also with a couple of tons. What were you hearing there?
Yeah, you'd imagine Head's knocking the Shield obviously got him over the edge with Usman. Clearly Travis Head's had so much invested in time and effort to make him that finished product. And at 29, this is almost his last hurrah, right? It was very, very close by the sounds of it. Interesting that Pat Cummins has come out and said very early on, a couple of days out from the test, what the order's going to be as well. But yeah, you'd imagine that 2 tests and then maybe Khawaja if he doesn't perform.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it makes much difference who they put in there, Head or Khawaja. I'd also put Marcus Harris in the same boat. They're all big question marks. I think Cameron Green will make it as a number 6. It may take a little while, but to me, Head and Khawaja, both of them are a real gamble, and I think you could have just tossed a coin in the air, and however it came down, that's the way you go as a selector.
Is there anyone else in the mix that you could see that might have been a contender there that was overlooked?
That's the big concern for Australia, that if you're looking ahead, and in each era you should have at least a couple of young batsmen who you can feed into the lineup, and particularly if you've got a good lineup, you feed a young guy in, he comes into an experienced lineup and he learns how to play down the order. Looking at the Australian side, they just don't seem to have that at the moment. And if I was George Bailey, I'd be a little concerned about what's lying ahead. When you look at let's pick the last 3 seasons of Shield cricket, you look at those stats and you're looking at the same names. You're looking at Khawaja, you're looking at Head, you're looking at the guys who have made the runs over the last few years, and you're not seeing new players coming through. I mean, guys like Patterson, they've fallen by the wayside. It's almost like we've got a lost generation. And if Head doesn't come through, OK, where's your next lot of batsmen coming from? I'm looking at the Shield scores. I'm not seeing that person.
Maybe, I was going to say maybe Will Bukowski.
Well, I was just going to ask the question about that.
10 times hit in the head. How does he get hit in the head 10 times? That's the first question.
Wow.
And if I'm a selector and I'm thinking this guy's been concussed 10 times, am I doing the right thing by picking him and putting him in that environment? He's got to play Shield cricket and not get hit. But everyone knows that he can make runs at Shield cricket. That's not really proving anything. So, yes, I think Pekowski's got the ability, but my big question mark is, how do you get hit in the head 10 times?
Is he likely to play again this summer?
No, they've effectively ruled him out. He's not going to get any Shield cricket, which is
He's not going to play this summer.
Maybe not the summer, but for the Test summer, right? Obviously, there's no Shield cricket in sort of the December period for him to show himself. You know, he's going to be playing club cricket, a handful of second 11 games. They're hopeful after January, but I wouldn't be seeing him in the Ashes.
Yeah. Well, half century on debut, mark against the Indians, and we know how well he's done for a young man in first-class cricket, Will Bukowski. It's a sort of cloud over Australian cricket at the moment, whether he'll recover his fitness at any stage.
Yeah, and I think Ian's point is extremely valid. Will Pekowski is the light. He is the young guy, 23-year-old that Australia are looking for to be our next Ricky Ponting, our next guy who plays 10 to 15 years of Test cricket. And I think that the questions that Ian are proposing are valid. That to get 10 concussions, they're not all cricket related, but the majority of them is of concern, because it's obviously a worry for his health going forward, but also how well he play the short ball. So that's the other question you've got to ask. And as Ian suggested, is that we need more than one Pekowski. We should have 3 or 4 guys, at least 1, maybe 2 from some of the bigger states in each Shield side that are belting the door down to say, hey, Steve Smith, hey, Labuschagne, hey, Travis Head, if you don't make runs, I'm the next man in. And at the moment, we don't have that. As Ian rightfully points out, they're generally the same names now we've heard for a number of years, and that's of concern. And maybe George Bailey will start now looking back to the 20-year-olds now, the 20, the 21-year-olds, that they might be the next generation we should be looking for to fill the voids in the future.
Each episode here, we're going to get Ian Chappell's power rankings, and the top 5 today, Ian, the 5 most influential players in this Ashes series.
Well, I think it's a bit of the blind leading the blind at the moment because of the lack of cricket that we've had in the lead-up. But these guys aren't, they're not going to surprise anyone. Pat Cummins is a very important man, even more important now that he's become captain. Steve Smith, if he makes runs, Australia are well on the way. And I've got David Warner in there because he scores quickly. And if he scores quickly, then Australia are probably going to win that test or certainly the series. For England, I don't think they can win the series if Joe Root and Ben Stokes don't perform well. Joe Root, I've got real questions about his captaincy, but his batting is very good. So I think he's got to get probably 500 runs in the series, and I think Stokes has got to get 300 to 400 runs. He's got to get them aggressively. But also don't discount his bowling. I think that'll be really important. If he has a good series bowling, that'll make a huge difference to England.
He's got a batting average close to 40 and a bowling average at just over 30. I mean, that's elite at Test level.
And then throw in the catching. He is a brilliant slip fielder, brilliant. So, but he's got to play well. Joe Root's got to play well. I'm not expecting much from Joe's captaincy, but he's got to play well.
And bat him at 3.
Hi to Joe Root out there. Well, Glenn McGrath says it'll be 5-0. Mark, I think Nathan Lyon says it was going to be 5-0. What are you saying? Prediction, most runs, most wickets in the Ashes.
Oh, look, I've always find it very difficult to go past backing Australia in Australia. I think I even did it last year, and Australia lost to India 2-1, which was a bit of a surprise. But I've got Australia to win the series 3-1. I think they've got the bowling to knock over England. They couldn't knock over India last year, but I'm not sure that England have got the players that India had last year. So Australia have got the bowlers to take the wickets if they can make enough runs. And I think the Warner point that Ian Chappell made is valid, that if he has a good series, I think England are in real trouble. The other guy to keep an eye out on is Hazelwood. He's the guy I think I've got down for the most wickets. A bit like Joe Root, I think he's probably in the best form of his life at the moment, Josh Hazelwood. So I've got Australia to win the series 3-1, Steve Smith to make the most runs. I can't go past him as the batsman to make the most runs, and Josh Hazelwood to take the most wickets. If this weather continues down the East Coast and the pitches have got to be in it, I wouldn't want to be facing Josh Hazelwood. He'll be an absolute nightmare.
Tom, what do you got?
I've got Australia 4-zip. I think there'll be maybe a little bit too much rain in Brizzy. And unless England can bowl under lights in Adelaide, I think Australia will go the next 4 from there. And then in terms of the batting, Steve Smith only averaged 40 last summer. Didn't get a century, but by his standards, that's not good enough. So I think he'll be incredibly motivated to pile on the runs there. And then Pat Cummins, same thing again. Obviously, there's been so much talk about him being a fast bowling captain. I think he'll be incredibly motivated to show that he can do that, very well.
And we'll probably play, all 5 Test matches, of course. So
Should.
There's an advantage.
I've got 3-0 to Australia because I'm not too sure what the weather's going to do. I just don't, unless Stokes and Root play really, really well, I just don't see England winning a game. Most runs, I'd say Steve Smith will probably be 400 plus for the series. And most wickets, I've got Pat Cummins because I think he'll get better and better as a captain as he goes along. I think he's the best bowler in the Australian side. I think Hazelwood could well have a good series as well. But I've got Pat Cummins down for 20 plus wickets.
Yeah, all right. Before we go, off the Ashes, history in cricket this week. Ajaz Patel from New Zealand took all 10 wickets in India's first innings, the 3rd time ever in Test cricket that's happened, and all 3 are spinners.
Well, what people forget is that Jim Laker took 10 for Surrey against Australia in that same season in 1956.
Right.
So he did it twice, although only once in Test cricket. Kumble did it against Pakistan, I think. Now that tells you something, if he's done it against Pakistan. And the 3rd one, Ajaz Patel, you wouldn't have picked him in a fit.
No.
Not in a fit. Although, New Zealand... go back to the days of Hadley. They didn't really have anyone at the other end to take many. And Hadley, what did he get? 33 in that series?
Well, he got 9 for.
Yeah, and he got 33 in that series. Yeah, in 3. So, you wouldn't have picked that, Ajaz Patel.
Well
How would you feel getting 10 for and then your team gets rolled for 60?
Yes, that was the other story as well. And Virat Kohli's blowing up that he was one of the wickets, but look in the scorebook, as they say. Thanks for joining us. That's our preview of the first Ashes Test. WWOS.com for all the Ashes news right throughout the summer. Mark Taylor, look forward to catching up with you again.
Thanks, Matt. And I'm looking forward to the summer kicking off on Wednesday. Fingers crossed we get, enough time to get a good Test match in and get the series underway.
All right, Tom Decent will read about everything that you've got for us in the 9 newspapers. And Ian Chappell, always great to catch up. Hope you enjoy the summer.
Thanks, mate. I'm not sure where I'll be, but I'll be here for the second test from somewhere.
You'll be watching, that's for sure. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.